Previously on AgentPalmer.com, Douglas Coupland's characters speak to me beyond grief in Hey Nostradamus. Similar lessons learned from yet another challenging year, and with 2 One Final Question volumes published, I contemplate other possible conglomerations. This is the Palmer Files, episode 62, with Jeff Quest, who you may know from Spywrite or any number of his spy-related podcasts. We discuss blogging and collecting, reading and creating, comprehension, memory, and much, much more. Are you ready? Let's do the show! Hello and welcome to the Palmer Files. I'm your host, Jason Stershik, also known as Agent Palmer, and on this 62nd episode is Jeff Quest. Jeff manages Spywrite, a site dedicated to spy fiction and nonfiction across all mediums, and has since added several podcasts that Jeff either hosts or contributes to. I was actually introduced to Jeff by Mr. Spybrary himself, and my former guest on episode 22, Shane Whaley, because of the Spybrary community. But we overlap in so many areas of interest and creation, and yet we're very different. This is just one piece of what you're about to hear. We discuss blogging and podcasting, collecting, processes of reviewing, book spoilers, staying within a topic versus navigating without one, not being too hard on oneself, and so much more. Yes, including some spy talk. Before we get going, remember that if you want to discuss the episode as you listen or afterwards, you can tweet me at Agent Palmer, my guest Jeff Quest at Spywrite, that's Spywrite, and this show at The Palmer Files. You can find Jeff's site at spywrite.com. Again, that's spywrite.com. And if you go to spywrite.com/about, you'll find links to all of Jeff's podcasts, the ones that he has now and the ones that perhaps he will add to his stable of podcasts in the future. Don't forget, you can see all of my writings and rantings on agentpalmer.com. And of course, email can be sent to thepalmerfiles@gmail.com. So without further ado, let's declassify the audio. Jeff, it is not often that I get to talk to somebody who's been blogging longer than I have and still does it on a consistent basis. So why have you continued to write?
Well, you're putting me in the hot seat since I've fallen off the wagon a little bit there, and I haven't been as consistent as I had been. It's hard to say how this all started. I mean, I started out, it was just for fun to try and do something kind of spy related, because for whatever reason I got reinterested. No, I don't know. That's probably not even the right way to say it. It's like I was looking for something else, right? Some other sort of creative outlet. Because I think for me, in college, I was, in theater and had that kind of creative outlet even for a few years after that. But then that kind of died down and I needed something else. I think everybody needs to find that kind of something that they can do outside of work. That work only gets you so far. It's
not fulfilling. Like you need that something. Like I did this for me, which, you and I are kind of similar in that, like, we have these long running consistent blogs and we're not making millions. We're probably not making hundreds or even 50s or what have you.
I'm in debt from my I'm not making any money on this.
I'm not. So. Yeah, no, I'm same boat. I didn't want to make any assumptions, but like it there is a sense of accomplishment in publish. But when you started, different than when you started with a topic, a subject matter in mind. Did you consider for a moment just doing like books and collection, like, you know what I mean? Like not just picking spy.
Well, I think for me, I hadn't, like, I started the blog right when I just barely had started collecting really seriously as well. So they were kind of almost separate tracks of my life. And so they weren't really connected at that point. And so I think for me, it was, I had kind of a initial start where I was posting a lot very regularly, like 3 times a week, little things about various different spy stuff. And then that quickly became unsustainable, and I just stopped and didn't do anything for a while before kind of coming back to it and really kind of focusing a little bit more on the book stuff. And that's when it kind of clicked for me and became more fun.
It's interesting because I feel like anybody who's done any creative pursuit for more than a year, even if they are adamant, like, oh no, I've been consistent for a year. No, you haven't. Like there are ebbs and flows. Like you and I are talking in decades, or a decade, right? Other people are talking in 4 or 5 years. Sometimes you get ahead of the game. Sometimes you fall behind. Like there are ebbs and flows to the creation process. And I think the reason that we get to keep going is because we come back to it. Like no matter what happens, we end up coming back to this. Does the fact that you have this parallel track of the collection, has that had any impact on the blog in terms of like taking time away because you want to be collecting, or vice versa, like you want to be writing so you're not collecting as much, like or is there a yin and yang to it?
Yeah, I think more than that, I'd say honestly, what's happened is I for a while I was posting because I felt like I needed to post something, so I'd find something to write about, right?
Okay.
But it's changed a little bit in that I've been doing being a little more selective about what I do post, and trying to write some longer things, some things that are maybe a little more esoteric, a little more out there, and things that just kind of strike my fancy. So that's kind of where I've been going lately. The other part of it is that I've just been podcasting so much more that's taken up a lot of the oxygen.
Well, you only have so much. I mean, we talk about like the day job can only fulfill you so much, but you can't do everything when you get home either. You only have a certain amount of creative space.
Yeah, well, and it's been even less so lately, just with, I had been kind of somewhat remote over the past, year, and it's amazing going back, every day, how much time that commute takes.
Yeah.
And the good thing is I'm reading a lot more than I had been. So that's to the positive, but it's also meant that I haven't had enough time to do some other stuff. And I don't know, I've written posts on my iPhone before, but it's not a fun experience. So, yeah, I don't know. It's interesting.
Your writing process, just straight up keyboard, sitting at a computer, or do you like handwrite notes? Like what's the process here? Because I'll give you mine, right? Like if it's a book, 99% of the books I've ever reviewed for my site I own, or I have physical copies of, because it's not even being a collector at that point. I just prefer the feel of a book in my hand. I will romanticize that until I'm dead. But because I don't know if this makes me a collector or like an OCD person in a different kind of a way, but I will be like, oh, there's a quote on page 92 about artistic ability. So I will pull out my phone and in a note go page 95, bottom paragraph, artistic ability. And I will come back to that later for when I eventually collect all my notes at the end, because I refuse to highlight it. I refuse to do anything to the book itself. And then I collect my notes when I'm all done, and I, collecting notes from, various, look, some books are a lot more quotable than others. And it's good that I have those now. I type them up and it reminds me of what I just read and in details that I might want to do. And then I sit down at a computer and I just go to town, right? And then here's the first draft, maybe pull a quote here and there, and then that's my process. There have been times where I have written something where it's like, oh, like, no, I have a thought. I have to get this out, and I'll write that on paper. But for the most part, I've moved digital, but I need a full keyboard.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I'm impressed with that you have that you have a process and that you use it, because I don't really have any sort of set process. It's like, it depends on what I'm doing, I guess. Like there's a lot of times where I'm on the train and I'm reading and I pull out my phone and I take a picture of the page that has whatever relevant thing on there.
I have done that before.
Sometimes I read the book and just, after I'm done, I open up my laptop and just hammer something out, and that's kind of where I'm at. It kind of depends. It just, sometimes I've, had little sticky notes I'm sticking all throughout the book that I'm reading to go back to and reference later. So it really does kind of depend on what I'm feeling about the book, how much I'm going to write about it, if it's going to be something shorter versus something I know I'm going kind of more in depth on. It just kind of depends for me.
How do you feel about spoilers? Because I am, look, I mean, it's no secret, and eventually, like I'm at the tail end of my date and read, right? Like I have, not counting the cookbooks, I have 6 more to go. I have the 3, and then the 3 in the middle, or 3 towards the end. That's not a trilogy, I guess, is Violent Ward, Mia Mista, and City of Gold, and then I get the final Samson trilogy, because I guess in published order. I've been reading in published order. And I don't have to worry about spoilers for myself because I don't read ahead. I don't look at the cover. I just know this is the next book, done, right? But you are collecting and you're out there. I'll be honest. I am always amazed when I go, all right, well, I like to keep my review spoiler free. What did the back cover give away? And I am always amazed at how much the back cover gives away. Where are you on the spectrum for like reading into the back cover, or like, Jeff, I have a book for you. Here, just pick it up and read it. How in the know do you get when you read most of the time?
Again, it kind of bounces all over, I'd say. Sometimes the worst thing that I do, and I do this with television and other stuff too, is that I will be like halfway through and I'm so into it that I start looking up what other people are saying, and that's where I get the spoilers,
Okay. I mean, I do understand, because there are times when you finish something, and books are harder than anything else. Like if we, in the height of Marvel, in the middle of phase 2, right? Like Iron Man 2 comes out. Good luck having a hard time trying to find somebody to talk about that with, right? But like books, it's so different that you're not just going to randomly walk into somebody who's just finished the same book you've just read. So I understand that.
And that's part of why I started doing a bunch of these podcasts that I do, where I can talk to folks who've read the book and want to talk about it. I think that's the best part, and what I hope that I'm kind of putting out there for other folks is that you're kind of eavesdropping in on some folks sitting around talking about a book you just read and loved.
Well, and so you have 3 now? Is that?
Well, yes. Let me see now. I've got 1, 2, 3, and then I contribute to Spywrite. So like 4 kind of regular shows that I'm putting out.
So not only are you guesting out there to be able to talk about books, but you're providing that space for other people.
If they're listening, and it's not just my mom, yeah.
It's do you find I went, every other week for the podcast release because I wanted to keep writing. You have 3 different shows plus what you contribute to Shane and Spybrary and the blog. your attentions are always divided and you're still consuming stuff. Like, how do you keep that all on track almost?
Not very well. It's not easy. And, I think that's always been part of my problem, I'd say, for my entire life, right? I'm all in on something, and then it's the consistency and keeping up with it that's really the struggle that I've always had is, I'm super passionate about something, and then keeping that passion going is always the trouble. And how do you do that? And I don't know that I've always been super successful at that. But the thing that I found more recently is, especially with the podcasts, one of them I do with a good friend of mine. And she keeps me on track and keeps, kind of bugging me so that we don't fall off, on putting that stuff out there.
That helps. Yeah.
Yeah. And the other thing I found is kind of changing things up. The podcast that we had been doing, I started interviewing various other folks that have read the books, and kind of that has kept things a little more exciting for me. And so I think that's the thing that I've discovered, especially like I just put out this new podcast looking at le Carré's work, and I had the first couple episodes recorded since before he passed away, so quite a long time, and I hadn't put them out because I was trying to get some sort of perfect, I was going to do all the books in order, and it was going to be this huge thing. And at a certain point I realized I'm never going to get this out there if I am so rigid in what I'm doing. And so I kind of let that vision go and kind of reimagined what I could put out there. And it's been really freeing and kind of exciting. So
now, along those lines, do you have an itch to write about non-book or non-spy themed things?
Like
I'm not trying to put you on the spot.
It's interesting because, if you'd asked me that a few years ago, I might have said something different. I might have been more about that. I've had a few ideas. It's kind of just random stuff. I'd say it's nothing like, I'll have an idea and I'm like, ooh, that would be kind of interesting to write about, but it's nothing that I have some sort of huge grand plan on something that I'd really start writing about, I guess.
I mean, because I can't imagine, despite the fact that I've written a lot about spies, period, right? Like between the movies and the books, and I'm sure I'll get to other things within that. It's just I write about everything, and I can't imagine being niche. Now I understand also, like, the dirty word for all creators of marketing, that it's easier to market when you only have that topic. Like, you have to appeal to me as a spy fan. I have to appeal to you and then try and hold your interest until the next time I write about a spy thing, unless you happen to also care about the things I write about in between, right? And so I do kind of envy you in that regard. Not the 3 podcasts. I don't know if I could handle that. That might be too much for me. But, that central theme, I kind of, I do envy it a bit.
Well, the interesting thing is it has offered some opportunities that I never would have imagined, right? I got to write a little article that ended up in in-flight magazines that went all over the world, right? And that's just because I wrote about a bunch about John le Carré, and so it kind of fell in my lap. And so that was really a cool thing, I mean, one of the reviews I wrote ended up as a blurb on the back of somebody's book, I mean, right underneath Alan Moore and above the BBC. So, I mean, that's kind of like funny.
That's
right?
really good company. Yeah.
It's just kind of funny. It's the things that you look at and you're like, wow, that's kind of crazy. So it's for me, the whole thing has been a bit of a, just a lark, it's not something that I'm trying to do to get anything back from, I guess, which is also kind of, it lifts a little bit of the weight. You can kind of give yourself a little bit of grace when you don't hit, that deadline or whatever else you're doing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And as much as I try to do that, if I don't, I can't beat myself up over it.
No, that makes sense. Because I think we, as creators, and I don't say that lightly, because I feel like it doesn't matter that we're not creating our own fiction. Or even if we are, we're not doing it a lot. But we're creating something and we're adding to the space, and it's okay that you didn't publish anything today. Right. Like I see all these people come up, and look, you and I are like the old men, like of blogging. Like there aren't a lot of people that are still doing it. At least that I know of, that started out around our time. And part of it is because they did put that pressure on themselves and they couldn't hold up under it, because that's an immense amount of pressure to hold yourself to. Like, yeah. I mean, I'm on a very good streak right now. Knock on wood, I haven't missed in a few years. But I can't say that I was publishing perfect posts every, whatever I wanted to be the schedule on the dot for the last 10 years like that. No, like that wouldn't have been possible. That's crazy, because I need to take the time to get, like, I do enjoy the reading part and the research part and all the other things that come with it.
Yeah, no, and I found too, like, I also, like, for me, especially when I'm working on some bigger things, like, I want to get it just perfect, but then at the same time, I need to just let it go. It's just like you just need to push the boat off the dock and let it drift away. And whether it's got, a couple of leaks that you might need to just overlook, that's okay.
Yeah, I mean, I have a note in my house that I used to stare at a lot more often, which is perfect is the enemy of good. And it is. I have some fans. Most often it's my father, calls me up and be like, you got a comma, or like, oh, you missed, you misspelled, or, the things that like spell check just won't get, like, you used the wrong there. It's like, well, I don't know, half asleep at the wheel when I was editing it. Thank you for letting me know. Right. But like, it happens. I'm human. I'm not an AI. Like, I'm not trying to craft the perfect post. Like, it's just, this is what I think. This is a good book. You should check it out too. Done. Right? Like, but you have, over the course of the last 10 years, I know you've read a lot, but you've also been watching, whether it be television or movies. The spy space has changed in the last 10 years a bit. I mean, it's definitely not what just Bond and assorted, Palmer movies, et cetera, were in like the 60s, 70s, and 80s. Do you enjoy the direction we are headed with all of the spies? And I say collectively, because obviously there's some outliers, but
yeah, well, I mean, it's interesting because there's so many spy shows right now. I mean, if you're looking at television, every streaming service decides they need their own spy show, right? And so they're going to put that out there. And some have been really good, some not so good. But I'm all for putting a lot of stuff out there and seeing what's going to get some traction. And a lot of times you're surprised by what you see, because everybody's got a little bit of a different kind of take on things, and that's the part that's fun.
Do you prefer a series or a movie?
Well, I think for me, I think for spy, I mean, it depends on the kind of spy thing that you're interested in, right? If you're looking for an action kind of spy entertainment, then movies are going to be where you want to go because they have the budget for it, right? Mission Impossible or James Bond or whatever. If you're looking for that more Le Carre-esque kind of slow burn spy drama, then you're obviously going to be better served in a television show because they have the time.
Yeah.
And,
Okay.
and the money, the lack of money doesn't hurt you in that case necessarily, right? If you got 3 people sitting around a table talking, that can be just as interesting for a spy situation as, somebody hanging off a helicopter.
I'm gonna put myself here first. I'm old enough to realize I don't want any part of it. I enjoy watching it. I enjoy reading it. I do not want to, I don't picture myself in the Bond or the Palmer or the Smiley or the Sampson role. They are now characters that I watch from afar and I enjoy it, right? Are you there, or do you still kind of want to do it?
Well, I mean, is there a part of me that thinks that would be totally wild? I mean, I was the kid that was running around his backyard with his friend, and their water gun Uzis and having adventures, Of course,
Sure.
There's a part of that appeals. I also know that I would be terrible at it. But, I don't know. I think I could see myself in the analyst role, I think.
Okay.
I mean, if you look at the CIA, you've got your operatives who are out there recruiting agents, running agents, and then you've got the analysts. They're reading, they're writing reports, they're thinking about the world. I could see myself doing that. I mean, I love doing the research part of things. And so, I got my master's in library science, right? So that part of it is appealing to me. That's probably why 3 Days of the Condor is one of my favorite spy movies, right? It's all about a CIA agent who just sits around and reads books all day.
So, are you a librarian?
No.
Okay.
No. Yeah, that was something I did, and then life took a whole different side direction, which
Now,
it does.
Does the Library of Science degree help you in any way with your collection, though?
No, not
Okay.
really.
All right.
Not really. I'm not that kind of a librarian, I guess.
No, I mean, because your collection is, and I know you write about it on occasion. Your collection is amazing, because I just tried for a collection of the closest I could come to first edition Dayton's with a few special editions. And that's what's behind me. Okay. You can't see it. It's below the camera, but it's what's behind me. And, I did all of it digitally. And I feel a little bad about that, with the exception of Spy Hook and Spy Line. Spy Hook and Spy Line I actually bought in a store somewhere. It's it. That's it, though. Everything else was digital for me. Am I cheating?
No, I've bought a ton of stuff online that's in my collection. And I don't know. I've talked to a number of collectors. A collection is really only worth what it's worth to the collector.
I see that. I could see that.
I mean, it's if I could be collecting, porcelain figurines, and it could give me just as much pleasure as what I'm doing here. And I could have bought them all online. And as long as I take pleasure in what I've got, then that's what really matters. Nobody should go into collecting thinking they're going to make $1 bazillion, because more than likely you're not.
No, you're going to spend that much.
Yeah, you're going to spend a lot of money, and maybe, there's the rare time where you get lucky and there's the one thing that you have that ends up being worth something, but you probably bought 5 times as many things that cost just that much. And, you should not go into collecting to try and make money. That said, there's a lot of fun and joy of the hunt that can be had with it. And I don't know. There's always going to be some collector out there who has a better collection, is the other thing. There's somebody who's going to have that.
Is that true?
Want,
is it
right?
really true? Or are we talking grass is always greener? That's just a slightly different, different variations.
I interviewed somebody who they're probably one of the biggest Le Carre collectors out there. And, he has every edition of Le Carre, pristine. His thing is he's always focusing on the condition. So his collection as a whole is worth a lot because it's in the best possible condition you could have, right?
Sure, yeah.
And even he told the story of meeting another Le Carre collector who is, has all of the same kind of stuff. And yet, he's talking to him about the time that he got one of his books signed by Le Carre at a signing. And this guy's like, oh, yes, I have that book signed, too. I got it signed by him over lunch the other day. Like they were literally he was having lunch with the guy. So, I think that was a great story, just proving that there's always somebody who's going to be a little bit more on their game than you, I don't know. So you gotta find the joy in what you have versus being jealous over what somebody else has. I guess that's what I would say.
Now, do family and friends try and help out? Like, do they, like, either do they scout for you or, like, in the beginning they were like, oh, here's a book?
No, it's really just my own kind of thing. They've kind of learned, I think, that it's not worth it to try and bother doing that. I've got my own. They have no clue really about it either. So about what I'd be looking for. So I don't think that, sometimes I'll put something on a wish list or something like that.
Okay.
But most of the time it doesn't show up. It's not the right thing or something in the end. So
is there a Jeff Quest part of your life that's not spy themed? Like not your day job, but like that's just, sometimes I put the book down and I watch this or I do this, like, or is it, this is my thing?
I would, it's funny because I love Spies and collecting and doing the podcasts and that stuff. I don't know that I'd consider myself as big a spy fan as some of the other people that I know. I feel like there's other people out there who are way more knowledgeable than me about this stuff and are the people who live and breathe it, and that's like their thing. I don't know that I maybe put myself in that category. Part of the reason I talk to so many people in these podcasts and stuff is because I don't know very much. I don't think I'm very smart on this stuff. That's why I talk to people who are smarter than me.
Would you would you consider yourself well read in the genre at least?
Yes, although again, I think talking to folks is a humbling experience because I realize how much I don't know and how much I haven't read, right? And how much I need to. And like my list of to read books is like a mile long, and
I mean, that's the curse of being a reader. But yeah. I think one of the things. So originally, when you and I were starting out, and this is for all creators, we have that imposter syndrome, right? And you don't always get over it, and sometimes it creeps back in. But you're like, oh, people are reading me. Why are they reading me, right? Like, or listening? Why are they listening to my podcast? And we get over that. But I think that when it comes to, and we'll talk about the spy genre, the people that you interview and the people that Shane interviews, and the discussions that we have therein, right? I think it really, what it boils down to is, number one, we're all fairly well read, and it goes back to what we were in high school. Like, I will be honest with you, if it weren't for writing those reviews, I wouldn't remember half of the things. And I'll go back, and even though it's spoiler free, by the time I get to the last Samson trilogy I have to read, and I'm looking forward to it, I'm going to have to read my last review to figure out where I was, right? Like, and I think that's where it goes back to like where you were in school, because in high school, specifically in middle school, at least in the United States. It's all about regurgitating that information and memorization. And some of us have it and some of us don't. And I'll never forget, like, I don't know what it was. It might have been like more middle school, where I read a book for, I don't know, 6th or 7th grade English. And the teacher asked what the teacher thought was a simple question. Now, I read the book. There were times I lied, but this time I had read the book, but I could not. It wasn't a detail I picked up on. It wasn't a subplot that made any, like that I cared about, right? Whatever it was not quite like that obvious thing. And because I didn't remember it, I was accused of not having read the material. Like, no, I just didn't pick up that piece. And I think that's one of those things where I fall into this category all the time of like, I know I'm well read. I don't pick up on everything. And so you and I can have the same reading background. We can have read the last 20 books we read could be exactly the same. You and I are going to have a very different discussion when we start going through all those books because of what you remember and what you retained and what I retained. And I think that's part of it. It's not really like imposter syndrome, but it is, because the moment somebody else remembers more, you go, wait a minute. Did I miss something? Like, I don't know what's going on. And I'm going to put that on just memory. And what else are you reading? Right? Like, you read 50 articles for work today. You read 1,000 emails, and then you came home and you read 50 pages of a spy novel. That's very different than the guy who read that book on a beach and read 50 pages in an afternoon. So, like, I feel like you are, I'm trying to build you up. You are definitely more well-read than you give yourself credit for.
Well, I think there's a difference between well-read and having that kind of analysis of books, right? I can read a ton of books, but there's some folks that are really good at just getting to the heart of some of the themes and things like that. And that's the thing that I love talking about. It's like that. I mean, I guess it goes back to school for me, and sitting in a class with that professor who has such great insights into a work that you hadn't read. And that's the thing that I love about talking to folks.
I could see that. I also wonder too, like, let me ask you this before I go on. How often do you reread a book?
I try, if I'm talking about it with somebody, I'll be rereading it generally.
Okay.
If I've already, because most of the time I've read it before, and so I want to have it fresh. If it's just, if I'm reading, it's like I'm already like, I've only got so many books in my life left, so I'm not going to go back and reread a book unless I need to.
Okay. Because and I've said this before on the show, like, I'm embarking on reading every book in my house just because I only have so much. We may only have so many books to read in our lifetime, but I only have so much space in my house for so many books. So I refuse to just donate a good book. I'm not going to throw it away, but like, donate. So one of the books that I was like, I'll read it, and if I don't like it, I'll get rid of it. And I guess I must be more well-rounded than I thought, because like, there are some books I've read that I'm like, oh, this was amazing. Also, some of these books, no idea how they got in my house, or in my collection, I guess. But one of those books was The Meadow, which was a novel that was assigned to me in a nature and literature class in college. And I have lost touch with almost every professor I ever had, but I just know that when I read this in college 20 years ago, give or take, I did not understand it at all. And now I get the relevance of it. And it makes me now think like, like, what am I missing from the books I haven't what am I missing from all those other books? And like, especially the ones for pleasure. This was one that was forced on me and I didn't get it when I was trying to, and I just pick it up and it magically makes sense now. So how much of that is life experience? How much of that is age? And that look, I'm not going to just start rereading books because, again, there are so many more that I want to experience. But I am a little more inclined to pick up a book and go, all right, well, I haven't read this in a decade, or I haven't read this in 5 years. Like, I'm in a different place now. What am I going to get out of it now? I think movies are a little bit easier with that because, we don't experience them in the same way. Like, very rarely are we going back to the theater to experience it again. And then we see it in syndication for a little bit. Or, you see, okay, yeah, I've seen all of From Russia with Love maybe 5 times in the last 10 years on various channels across different plot points and whatever, but not all of it. I haven't actually sat down to watch all of it in a long time. And I wonder, like, will it hit me? Will I, like if I rewatch every Bond to do a countdown for the movie that came out last year, and I didn't, but like if I had, would I treat would I have a different favorite Bond? Like I wonder how time now plays with all of those things.
Sure. I mean, I think definitely with books, you'll see, yes, different where you are in life is going to change what your view of the book is potentially. I think with movies, it's the interesting thing is there's not only that aspect, but the fact that you could be watching it with different people and you have that immediate like kind of interaction, right? Where you can talk about it and have a completely different view of it. I put movies and television in almost a whole separate thing as far as rewatchability, because the experience can be so different versus a book where it's solitary, right? You're reading it on your own and you're likely not going to finish it, as you said before, at the same moment somebody else did to talk about it.
Yeah. I mean, the closest I think I would ever come to that would be scheduling a podcast. Like, okay, you and I are going to read this book over the next month, and in a month we will talk about it. Like, I think that scheduling it like that, like rigidity, would be the closest I could ever come to being like, all right, well, I finished that. Now I get to talk to somebody about it. This is amazing.
Yeah.
But I want to go back. What is non-spy Jeff doing? Like, are you watching sports? Are you playing video games? Are you like listening to music? What's going on?
Yeah, well, I mean, I love sci-fi. That's the other thing that I really enjoy. So reading science fiction and watching sci-fi movies, that kind of stuff. I love running. And I've kind of really focused on that over the past, 8 months or so, is getting back into that regularly. That's been a really good thing. So, and I know you're a runner, right? So
yeah, well, I mean, we're recording this in quote unquote the cold season. So no, I'm not a runner, but when the temperature goes above 65 again, I will be a runner again. I got soft. I mean, I can tell stories about like in high school running cross country and having a biology teacher as an assistant coach who was a wannabe psychologist who would be like, you guys are not wearing sleeves and you're not wearing tights and you're not wearing gloves. You're going to psych out the other team even though it's snowing. Like, and you're like, I don't know, you're young and dumb and you're like, okay, let's do that. No, I'm not that kid anymore. It's cold. I'm staying in. So slightly like that, but all right. I mean, science fiction's another one too. I'm with you there. Although, for me, I've just started to get back into it. Movies, I think, have always been there. That's the easy bit. I think books, it's harder. But I'm obviously reading books in my house. I have some Clark and some Asimov and some Bradbury, and like I haven't touched these things I've moved them many, many times. Haven't touched them in a long time. I don't know if they're going to resonate anymore. And that's it's kind of like taking an inventory of my book collection, but I'm not actually counting, except I'm reading them. And in that regard, it's very slow. It's a very slow process. We have other things. I can't just sit down and read 24/7. But it has been forcing me to read some things that it's like, why do I have this? Oh, this is really good. That's why I have it. How did I get it? Again, no idea.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing, though, I love about books, right? Is that you'll buy something or you'll have it sitting on the shelf, and it can sit there for a decade. And you'll pull it off and you'll read it, and it's just as good as it was when you put it on the shelf and left it there, right? I mean, it's like it's just waiting, and there's nothing wrong with that, I think. Most of the books that I have on my shelves that aren't part of like my official, quote unquote, collection, right?
Yeah.
Most of those books are books I haven't read, because once I read a book, I tend to, give it to somebody else to read, or, donate it someplace. I don't keep I don't have a ton of things that I've already read. It's mainly stuff that I haven't read yet that I keep, that I need to get to.
I have a hard time parting with them. I really do. Even I'm starting to build author collections, which is, I guess I can blame Dayton for that one, because it was Dayton, and then I rediscovered Douglas Coupland and went, oh, like I really like, okay, like okay, let me read the next one. All right, and the next one, oh, okay, all right, fair enough. And I was already a fan of Klosterman, and I'm a fan of Clive Barker. Like I'm starting to hoard by author. And I think, look, there's no going back. You can't undo this, right? Like, you fall in love with an author, you fall in love with an author. I could have picked some less prolific authors. Like, I mean, you wouldn't have known that, but and of course, I'm starting from behind the eight ball. All of these authors have been fairly prolific, that, we're talking at least 10, more oftentimes 20 or 30. And I don't even own all of them. I mean, that's kind of still the fun, is like, I skipped a book, but I'm a stickler for reading it in published order, because I feel like it tells you a little bit more about the author. That's just me being, I don't know, a bit OCD with it, but like, I think it is interesting to put it in time and place. This was written before this, and then when I read this, which may or may not be related, it okay. Like, because I think if I had picked up the Samson verse, I wouldn't have picked up that, like, there have been 3 times in the Samson verse that Bernard Samson sits down with someone and a bottle of Palmer as a brand of wine or a vineyard was put on the table. That's not by accident. That's not just happenstance, right? But because I read these things in order, it builds off of it. I think all authors do that. I've done that. I don't even I could probably be better at interlinking all my blog posts and stuff, but I'm sure subconsciously I'm always building on what was written before.
Sure. Well, and I think that's what everybody does. You're always looking at what you've done before, and even if you don't realize it, even if it's subconscious, right? You're improving or changing or moving forward with what you've done.
Well, you say that, and now I'm going to put a hypothetical to you, which happened to me.
Uh-oh.
I have been quoted to myself once or twice by people who have read an article of mine, especially older ones. But they don't tell me they're quoting me. They'll just give me this paragraph or this line, and they'll be like, "This is really good." I'll be like, "It really is." Who wrote that? And they go, "You did." I'll tell you what, man. I am still amazed at how good I have been because I can't remember half of it. Has anyone ever quoted you to you and you didn't know it? Or has anybody been like, this is a really good article? And you were like, oh, I wrote this.
I haven't had that happen, but I have gone back to look at some of the stuff that I've written. I'm like, I don't remember doing that, but that actually is pretty darn. I can't believe you wrote that because that is really pretty well done, you know? And isn't that a great feeling though? Like, I mean, it's got to feel good, right? I know it did for me. Is like when I look back and I'm like, yeah, that's not bad. Even and not remembering writing it, I think adds to that because you can look at it with fresh eyes.
I waffle. I waffle because there are part of me. Part of me is like, it was great. How come I don't remember it? Because look, I'll be the first to admit, like, 10 years. I'm sure some of that stuff's not like. I'm sure I put everything I could into it. But when I put everything into today may not be as much or half as much or double the amount of what I put in yesterday or tomorrow. Right? So there's different levels to putting your all in. Like, oh, I had a great day at work today. So this is the post, you know, or I had a crap day at work and this is the post. And you never know. So I just go and like, I should remember the great stuff. You know, like that's the thing. I feel like I should remember the great stuff.
Well, but you also don't have that perspective yet. You know, I think the reason it seems good is because you have forgotten it. You don't remember doing it,
Okay,
right? You've got the perspective. You've had the time away from it. When you're in the middle of writing something and looking at it, you don't have any of that perspective. You don't know, right? I mean, I think that's true of every writer that I've heard. You know, it's all about the editing and going back and leaving it and coming back to it later. And I think it only gets easier to look at it fresh when you come back to it after a long time away. And it's put to bed and you don't have to think about it anymore because that horse is already out of the barn, right? It's run down the road. There's no way to put it back in the box.
Now, speaking of that, I did want to ask you did talk about earlier that you do enjoy these lengthier posts at times. And you and I have both in that regard written lengthy posts and short posts. If I had to put you on the spot right now and you could only write short little bursts or long lengthy posts, and it would be and we would adjust everything in the universe accordingly, right? Like if you're going to do lengthy posts, it'll be like, you know, maybe fortnightly, you know, or if you're going to do short posts, you can stay weekly or whatever. Like do you have I mean, obviously each book or post or movie has its own, you know, speaks to you for what format it's going to be. But do you have a preference? Just, you know, I'm going to give you a topic. I mean, I'm not, but like, I'm going to give you a topic. But before I do, you have to choose a bunch of short posts or one really long one. Do you have a preferred, I don't know, style?
I'm not going to give you a great answer here. I think it's going to be, it depends on what it is, right? You know, I think for me, I like if I have something that I can do a lot of research on, I can pull a lot of different facts in that nobody's ever really pulled together in that specific way. If it's something I can be kind of a little funny with too, that's the kind of the thing that I love to do is those longer ones. But there's other things that I like putting out there. You know, if it's a book review that it doesn't need, you know, 2,000 words, you know, I just put that out there and let folks, because the other thing is I love putting out reviews of books that folks might not pick up otherwise, right? And so if that helps people look at a book, it doesn't need to be, you know, some intense, you know, analytical piece of writing that goes on for, you know, 50 pages talking about the book. It can just be, this is why it's worth picking up and reading.
Okay.
That's the other thing is the part of the reviews that I'm terrible at because I hate it is the like kind of regurgitating the plot back. that's the part that I despise trying to do that.
I usually quote the inside dust jacket or the back cover or a piece of it, right? Because again, I'm that guy who hates some of the stuff they give away on those things. But I'm with you. If there was a way to write a review, even spoiler free, with just being like, it's great, there's lots of action, there's witty dialogue, you'll love it, and maybe a few quotes, that'd be great. Why do I have to tell you something you can easily find on your own?
Yeah, find it. Well, and for me, it's like find a new way to say something everybody else has already said, right? You know?
Yeah.
Versus giving more of kind of my thoughts on the book are. That's my thing.
Now, negative reviews. I'll be honest. I've written one. And I think I've gotten lucky, but for the most part, if I ever have a negative review again, I probably just won't write about it. I'm not going to ask you, I'm not going to put you like on the spot, but have you written negative reviews?
Yeah, but it was a long time ago, and It was a book that I really just really did not like.
That was my excuse.
It was, but anymore, it's not worth the energy for me, you know, and most of the time I'm self-selecting out of books that I'm going to hate anyway. Right. You know, I'm not going to force myself to finish something that's just terrible. And most of the time I'm not picking up books that are terrible anyway, you know, cause I've heard good things about them. So, and the ones I hear bad things about, I just don't read.
I will say, having a community of readers around you is the best safeguard against a bad book, because you can blame somebody. Like, if it does happen to be a bad book, you can just turn on somebody. Why did you suggest I read this? Or why did you give this a glowing review, right? Like, you have a built-in like mechanism for dealing with the angst of this not good experience, versus, for the most part, I think people are fairly, I only want to give you a good thing to read, I think.
You know, it's one of those things where I feel like it's not worth crapping on somebody's enjoyment of something is the other part of it, because, you know, and yes, there are just truly bad books out there, and I don't mind people writing legitimately negative reviews of stuff. That's part of what criticism is and should be, right? You need to be able to tell your opinions, whether positive or negative. What I don't like, and what you see online sometimes, is people like just throwing out, oh, that's crap, you know, it's not worth anybody who reads that, they just terrible taste, that kind of a thing, you know. It's like, if somebody's getting enjoyment out of this thing, if I don't like it, well, it's no skin off my nose to not like it, but you don't need to make other people feel like garbage for enjoying it, you know? And that's just an online culture thing, I think, more than anything, because when people are in front of you, they're a lot less likely to do that. But
I think part of it is a post I've not written yet that I might someday, but I don't have the meat to it, because right now it's just a tweet that I feel like needs more, but right now I can summarize into a tweet that somebody likes everything. Even the books you and I hate, somebody out there loved. The movies we don't like, the albums you don't like, the comic books, the characters, you name it. If you don't like it and it was made and not by you, somebody out there likes it. That's just how it works. So I feel like there's more to that. I don't know why, but that's
it's you know, it's one of those tightropes you got to walk, right? Because to not allow people to have criticisms or to critique things because other people like it isn't a good response. We need to be able to talk about those things in a way that isn't nasty.
Yeah.
So we can have those discussions about why we do or don't like something. But I think the problem is so often it's easier to be nasty than not, right? And so that's the problem.
We didn't really focus on collecting, but it did come up, and I'm glad Jeff said a collection is really only worth what it's worth to the collector, because it makes sense that while not all of the collections that inhabit my house are worth real money, they are all worth something to me. Some of it could be financial. The $20 Magic card I bought 20 years ago when $20 was a lot more money to me than it is now, or just the small piece of art I picked up because I had a conversation with the artist. Collections could be of anything. As mentioned, I have a library and collect books by authors, but I have a massive collection of Magic the Gathering cards, as well as a few other assorted collectible card games. I have a collection of art and posters, much more numerous than the space I have on my walls, and I have other things as well. The point is, these things mean something to me, either because of what they are, or what they meant to me in acquiring them. I did not realize Jeff doesn't keep all his books that he reads. It's just not something that occurred to me, but we all collect differently. And part of that is because, as we discussed, collecting is expensive, either in time, money, or space. We all only have a finite amount of time. We all only have a finite amount of money, and for sure, we all only have a finite amount of space to house our collections, even if they're digital. But that doesn't mean it's not worth it. If you're collecting, it must be worth something to you, and that is all that matters. So, share with us what you are collecting and why it means something to you. And if you haven't thought about why you are collecting something, perhaps now is the time to understand just why that is. Thanks for listening to The Palmer Files, episode 62. As a reminder, all links are available in the show notes, and now for the official business. The Palmer Files releases every 2 weeks on Tuesdays. If you're still listening, I encourage you to join the discussion. You can tweet me at Agent Palmer, my guest Jeff Quest at Spywrite, that's Spywrite, and this show at The Palmer Files. You can find Jeff's site at spywrite.com. Again, that's spywrite.com. And if you go to spywrite.com/about, you'll find links to all of Jeff's podcasts, the ones that he has as this is released, and perhaps any he adds to his stable of podcasts in the future. Email can be sent to the show at thepalmerfiles@gmail.com. And remember, your home for all things Agent Palmer is agentpalmer.com. All right, Jeff, do you have one final question for me?
I do. I was wondering what you have on your keychain and why.
Okay, so car keys, key fob, whatever.
Okay.
And a key, actually, because I have an older car, so I still have the key fob and the key, because it's not push button.
Okay.
I have a key to my house, my friend's apartment. Oh no, 2 keys to my friend's apartment because he's at an outer door and an inner door. And I'm the we're basically
Is this like a safety thing, or water the plants, or what?
We're basically family, but if he ever lost his keys, I'm a couple blocks away. We've been best friends for 30 years, so it works out. And then I have 2 keys to my parents' house, and a leftover from one of my last jobs is a Windows 10 USB boot drive, which is like a really small form factor USB that I always forget is on there, until it's raining and I go, is this going to get wet when I take it out to open my car door or something? Like, oh no. And then, and this, I have so in college, I had one of those lanyards for keys that everybody seems to do in college. And it had the little like clip, so that you could take off the lanyard part, I guess. So the part you clip it into is still on my keys. And it's been that way for 17 years now, since I left campus. There are occasions when I do clip the lanyard back in, although...
Wait, so you still have the lanyard?
Yeah.
You just don't have it clipped on.
I just don't have it clipped on. Yeah. That's, I think, because my keys aren't on me. I mean, that's the other thing. Being home so much over the last little bit, like it's I barely carry my wallet on me. Like the whole, like if I was going to leave the house immediately, I have to make some stops. Whereas like in the before times, I think I always had my keys and my wallet on me. You're in, you're out, you're going places, and now we haven't been. So it's like, I think my keys are where I usually leave them. My wallet might be wherever I made my last online purchase. I don't. But no. Actually, I might have one keychain. I don't know if it's still on there. But I had a keychain that was the Hebrew for the Jewish traveler's prayer. But I do know, because it's one of those, I guess, glass keychains with the little metal clasp. And I do know at least once in the last 10 years, I have had to get pliers out and tighten the metal that was, kind of loosening its grip on the plastic. And I haven't actually looked to see if it's still there. I mean, I could lose it along the way. I wouldn't know. I think that's what's on yours.
Well, I got key to the car, and it doesn't have any buttons on it, so it's just we cheaped out.
Okay,
so as the bonus one, right? So I'm the backup car key guy, so I've got the non-button one.
I have my partner's car key fob on as well, so I have two now.
You're double loaded, ready to go.
Yeah.
So I've got a car key, I've got house keys, key to the garage, key to my parents' place, work keys, key to our office, and then also other office.
Okay. Well,
too many work
see,
keys.
and it's funny. I mean, if you had asked me years ago, I would have had a work key.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'll ever have a work key ever again.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's interesting that, who knows? So many people are working remotely now that you may not even go in anymore anywhere, right? It's crazy.
Who knows? Yeah. So no keychains.
I have a Johnny Quest. There was the 90s cartoon show. They released these, the logo as a keychain, and I bought that at Great America back when I was in high school.
Okay.
And it's JQ, stylized JQ.
Now, how many
logo.
people called you Johnny?
Well, nobody calls me that, but everybody brings it up.
Okay.
And so here's the thing. My middle name is John.
Okay. All right. I can't.
So it's like a family name. And so my parents were kind enough to not make it my first name. So I guess I owe them a debt of gratitude.